In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how you can actually start animating your sprites using the animation tab in LibreSprite, and of course, a basic challenge to put these skills to the test by the end of this lecture. All right, so to begin this lecture, I will create a new file, and I'll make this a 16 by 16 size canvas, just so we have enough room to actually work with. Okay, perfect. So the main thing that we're going to be focusing on today is actually this tab right at the very bottom of your window. And so this is going to be our animation tab. We haven't played around with it too much other than creating different layers, which we've done. But now we're actually going to be looking at these different frames, which again, we have technically used, just not in an animation setting. So before we get into the actual animation and creating a basic animation, I'd like to actually, once again, just grab a color palette that you like to use. So I'm going to select this AAP 64 palette, and we're going to be using this later on when we create an object to animate. But for the beginning, I just want to grab some kind of blue color or whatever, and I will make a basic box. So I'm just going to go over to this right tab here, and I'll select the filled rectangle tool. And what I can do is I can come from the top left corner and we can move 2 or 3 pixels down, let's say, and 3 pixels in. And if I left click and drag, if you hold down shift, you can keep this to being the same width and height. So we can create a proper square, and I'll just make this the same 3 pixels from the bottom corner. So we have enough space now, and really all we're going to do to create a basic animation is we're going to come down here and we're going to select the right click button on the one tab here, and we're going to do create new. When we create a new tab, what's going to happen is it's going to duplicate the exact same sprite over. So now how do we actually use animation? Well, there's not too much to animation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press M to go to our select tool. I'm going to select this box here, and I'm just going to use the arrow key and move this over 1 pixel to the right. So now what we have is if we select this one again, we can see that our box has moved 1 pixel to the right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this second box here, this number 2, and a shortcut that you can use instead of right clicking and pressing new every time is you can press Alt N. And what Alt N is going to do is it's going to duplicate, again, creating a new frame or a new cell with the exact same layers and sprite properties that you've just created. Another way that you can create a new frame is by clicking Alt B. And what Alt B is going to do is it will create a new cell or frame of animation, but it will not carry over any properties, so you will be left with a blank slate. For this example, we don't need a blank slate, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to right click and press remove to delete that frame. And once again, Alt N when I'm selected on this box to create a 4 frame animation. Now I'll go back to this 3 frame here, selecting the entire square, and I'm going to move it 1 pixel to the left. And now we're going to have the same orientation that we had in our first box. And for the 4th frame, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select this whole thing here, and I'm actually going to move it over 2 pixels to the left. And so what is going to happen now is we have almost like a sliding box that's going to move to the right and to the left and back to center. And so if we play the animation just by clicking this tab here or pressing shortcut enter, we can see that we can actually animate this cube very, very simply just by moving its orientation to the right and to the left. Before we move on, I'd like to show you how you can actually export this into something like a video game, or like we'll be doing later in this lecture. So I'm going to quickly pause this animation here. And we're going to begin by just going to File in the top left here and clicking on Save As. And we can save this as whatever. So I'm just going to save this as sliding box. And all we have to do is just change the file format. So we're going to do the .gif. And what that is going to do is it's going to render it out as a .gif file. And we can click yes. And we're going to select animation loop. Okay. And so if we were to actually go to this file location, you will be able to actually open this up and you can see it moving. It's a little bit hard to see. And so if you'd like to actually make this a little bit bigger and be able to export this at a bigger file size so that people can actually see it properly, I'm going to close out of this tab real quick. And what we're going to do is we're going to come up to Sprite up in the top left. We're going to go to Sprite size. And what we can do is we can just percentage scale this. So the file size that I think is pretty good is 600%. Make sure that nearest neighbor is selected, as if you do have one of the other options, you might get a blurred photo. So I'm going to click OK on nearest neighbor. And now this is 6 times the size of our regular image. And we can do the same thing. File, save as, and I'll just save this as slidingbox2.gif. Click OK. Yes, I would like to use the .gif file format. Animation loop is checked off. Click OK. And if we go back to the same place that we saved this to, we can see that our box is much bigger and we can actually see it being animated. So it's just an easy way to be able to export your images at a bigger file size, but just make sure, again, that if you want to actually edit this again, just make sure that you're returning this back to the real size. So we had a 16 by 16 size image. So I'll click OK, and that is going to put it right back to the normal scaling size. That is pretty much all we need to get started with animation. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to make a quick little wooden crate just so we can have an actual object that could be used in something like a video game. I'll start by deleting all of my previous frames so I can be stuck with this one basic frame and get started on making the actual wooden crate. For creating the wooden crate, I'm going to start by using a brown color to paint over the entire box, and I'm going to decide where the top and where the front of the face of the crate actually is. Now I'm testing with some outlines, didn't really like it, so I'm actually extending the entire canvas out one. And now we're just drawing some lines to create line separation, and we'll use one more color to highlight the top corner edge and actually just mirror this display on the top, but at a slightly different angle. And now I'm just playing around and trying to make this look a little bit better. And something I noticed is I needed a 4th color. So I'm actually using this other brown that has 4 colors in it instead of just the 3 brown colors in the other palette example. And I'm using the darkest color for the inside of the crate. And I'm just going to dot the corners around the crate to provide some more shading. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I did actually leave 2 pixels on the top left shading, which was a total accident, but sometimes we do make mistakes. So this is my crate. Okay, perfect. So I have my little wooden crate here, but we're going to be moving it up and down. There is one thing that I am going to be doing a little bit differently, which we'll see in a second. But we're just going to create a 4-frame loop. So I'll click Alt-N 3 times so we can have 4 frames. I'm going to come over to this second tab here, select my box, and I'm actually going to move this up 2 pixels. And the reason that we're doing that is we want to create a little bit more motion in this drawing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have the box move up 2 pixels. And then on the 4th frame, we're going to come back down here and move this down 1 pixel. And what this is going to do is when we play the animation, we're going to see that the box looks as if it's floating up faster than it's falling down. And that's because we have that 2-frame effect on our way down. Another thing we could do is pause this animation and we could go to the 3rd frame and move this up 1. And so what that is going to do is it's going to have the downward motion quicker as well. So you can play around with different kinds of animation speeds and motion using different effects, but that is going to be it for this lecture. So I hope you learned a little bit more about how we can actually start animating things. I know we're only using movement right now, but the entire point of this whole section is to discuss animation and slowly work on more advanced tactics to creating cool animations.